Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing what is, for me, a long-intended video, which is wrapping up all of the 2025 Lady Night book releases that I read last year. I meant to do this at the beginning of the year when it made sense to be like wrapping up a big portion of my reading from the year, but it didn't happen, so we're doing it now. But we all know that 2025 was like the year of the Lady Night. There were so many Lady Night books coming out last year. I read 7 that I felt were like the most prominent, the most hyped that were coming out last year. And so now I'm going to tell you what my thoughts and feelings were about them. We're going to be ranking them from my least favorite to my most favorite. And the thing about this though is I have one clear least favorite, I have 2 favorites, and then there's a chunk in the middle of like 4 of them that are all kind of in the like 3.5, maybe edging into 4-star range. And so the exact order of these could kind of flip-flop at any time. So I'm going to be ranking them to the best of my ability as of my feelings right now. But the ones that are like really definite are like my bottom 1 and my top 2. Of course, also a lot of these books, as I said, were very hyped. A lot of people read them, a lot of people loved them, had a lot of feelings about them. If I didn't like a book that you loved, like, I love that for you, that you found joy in that book, but it was not for me, obviously. I also will say many of these are romantasy, which is not a favorite genre of mine, and so I may not be the target audience in terms of the romantasy, but I did feel like I was kind of the target audience in that I love Lady Nights, so I still wanted to give them a shot. Also, before I forget, I will say, if you want to know some of my recommendations for Lady Night books pre-2025, I do have a short that I will link in the description, so you can see what other Lady Night books I have found over the years. But, okay, this is a lot of like preamble. Let's just get into like ranking these books. So we're going to be starting with my least favorite, which I know for a fact I'm an outlier here because many people have loved this, but for me, my least favorite was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is it is described as like a gothic romantasy, although I have seen some people say that it's not romantasy, it is just fantasy with romance. Personally, I disagree. I think this firmly lands within the romantasy genre. But this is the first Rachel Gillig that I have read, and in this our main character is one of a group of women who have kind of been raised in seclusion. They must cover or veil their eyes, and they are diviners, which means that their purpose is to drown themselves in this magical pool to have visions that will let them interpret the future for people. And one day the new young king comes to have his future divined, and soon after he gets there, the girls start disappearing, and our main character is determined to find them, so she enlists some of the king's knights, and by consequence also the king, into helping her kind of solve this mystery and figure out what has been happening to her sisters. And along the way, of course, there's a romance between her and one of the knights. This is at the bottom here for me for a few reasons. One is that I didn't really get along with the writing. This does suffer from what I would consider thesaurus writing, although certainly not the worst case, in which it is using words slightly incorrectly or like in a way that just doesn't quite make sense, and it is very frustrating. I did start a little tally in the back of words that I thought that were being misused and what word I think that could have been used there instead, and whenever I start doing that, it's never a good sign for the book or my enjoyment of it. I did switch over from physical to audio for this so that that would stop bothering me so much, and that definitely did help. But overall for me, I didn't really get along with the writing in this. This is often pitched as being so atmospheric. It didn't feel atmospheric to me. I think, again, this comes down to the writing. I also felt like the world building in this felt quite hollow and inconsistent at times in ways that I felt frustrated by. I didn't really feel engaged by the characters in this. I wasn't sold on the romance. It is a type of romance that I also just don't get along with. It's kind of, it's not enemies to lovers, but it's kind of this like dislike to love, where it like starts off with them being antagonistic to each other for absolutely no reason. And it like, in such a way that is baffling to me, that I am like, I can tell the book is meaning for this to like build sexual tension, and I'm like, they're just being rude to each other for no reason. Like, just stop talking to each other. What's happening here? Like, it just baffles me, and I don't feel very engaged in those kinds of dynamics and relationships. And I don't think that it improved from there. My other gripe with this is that where is the lady knight? Because our main character is not a lady knight. Like, okay, I will give two caveats to this complaint. One being, there is a side character who is a lady knight. She's not a main character, but she's there in the background. So like, there's that. And also, this is the first book in, I believe, a duology. Our main character could potentially become a lady knight in the next book. So like, maybe, like, I'm not reading the next book, but it's possible. In this one, there is not a lady knight. She does wear armor at one point, but that doesn't count. So this is my lowest one. I think I originally gave this 3.5 stars. I think that this is probably more of a 3-star at this point. It has really only soured in my memory, so it's getting knocked down a little bit. However, I think if you like romantasy in general as a subgenre, and some of those writing quirks that maybe bother me don't bother you, then you might like this, because I think that as far as romantasies go, I feel like this is a fairly well written one. So if that is a subgenre that's for you and you're not as nitpicky as I am, then maybe this one will be great for you, and that would be great. All right, now that we have gotten my least favorite out of the way, we're kind of into this middle gray area of the 4 that are sort of in this like 3.5 star range for me. So at the bottom at the moment of this group, for me, is The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino, I believe is the author. This is also a romantasy. I believe it is the first in like a companion series, so I don't know if these specific characters are going to be continued, like to be followed. But in this, our main character is Gray. She is a knight who is one half of a dynamic duo with her childhood best friend, who is a mage. And in this world, the way that the magic works is that there is a mage and there is a well, and she is the well, meaning that she is a source of magic, but she is not able to wield magic herself, so she is magically bonded to her friend, who is then able to draw and wield magic from her. In this world, magic comes from this kind of lost city or lost country that has disappeared or people can't really access anymore. And so there is this eternal hunt for the heir to this magical place. They believe, early on, they believe that they have found this heir, and they are now on a quest to try and return her to her home to kind of kickstart and like restart or reinvigorate the magic of this world, which also has political implications. And once again, of course, there is a romance along the way, because Gray is, in addition to being magically bonded to her friend, she is also in love with him. So this one, so for me, this one is slightly above The Night and the Moth, because I just generally kind of enjoyed it more. I did this one fully on audio, and so I don't know if the writing style would have bothered me if I read it physically. I generally found the characters more likable and engaging in this one. I do also think that one of the things that kind of won me over for it is that the romance trope in this is friends to lovers, which is a trope that I specifically like. So, you know, this is a very subjective list. It is not objective in any way, shape, or form. So for me, a friends to lovers trope is definitely going to win me over more easily than a hate to love, like The Knight and the Moth. One of the reasons, in addition to just I like the trope, is that because the romance is so central to this story and it happens so quickly, in a friends to lovers, they already have that backstory, they already have that dynamic and that relationship established. And so as long as the author can make me believe that these characters are friends, they have that history together, and that they are in love, or one of them is in love with the other, then I'm on board. And it is easier for me to kind of quickly catch up to that emotional investment in a friends to lovers scenario because I believe in that history, as opposed to strangers meeting each other, being antagonistic, and then developing a relationship. That's much harder for me to get invested in quickly. Anyways, so this is friends to lovers, which I enjoyed. Yeah, and overall, I just kind of had fun with this one. I know a lot of people seem to have liked the first half better than the second half of the book. I'm kind of the opposite. I felt like the first half dragged a little bit for me, and then the second half felt like it got more into like the meat of the story, and then also got more into the emotional stakes for these characters, which I really enjoyed. Now, one of the reasons though that this is kind of at the bottom of this middle section is because for me, she did not give me knight vibes. Once again, a very subjective measure. However, I spent a lot of time thinking about like, what is it that makes a good knight character? And I don't mean good as in like morally good, but good as in like, they're giving me the vibes. Like when I say I want a knight, this is what I mean. I made a whole short about like what characteristics or criteria make up a well-written knight character to me, so I'll link that in the description too. But some of them involve that the main character has loyalty to either some like higher power, whether it's a king or an order or a cause. Also that they are not kind of just like a drudge within the army, that they have some kind of special status as a knight. They are not just some other kind of soldier. And I think that those are kind of two of the places where I just don't necessarily feel that in Grey's character. I don't really know what she's loyal to other than her best friend, and I love seeing that loyalty to her friend, but that's not a higher power, that's not a higher purpose. And often what is compelling to me about a knight is the internal conflict that they have between these higher ideals of their loyalty to this like higher purpose and these more like everyday personal loyalties that they have to people in their lives. For Grey, there wasn't really that conflict. She didn't really have any kind of greater loyalty. It was really just loyalty to her friend and love interest. And so she was very cut and dry in that way. And then the other piece is that functionally, she really seemed like she essentially was just a soldier within the army. She has magic, she's part of one of these magic duos, but she didn't really feel like she had any kind of knightly status. She really felt much more like just a soldier within, you know, the many layers of hierarchy of the army. And so in that way, she just didn't really give me the knight vibes that I was looking for, even though she is technically a knight in this world. So that is why it's like lower down on this list for me, even though I did enjoy this one. But I would say if you enjoy The Second Death of Locke and you're looking for another lady knight book to read, you might like the Alana series by Tamara Pierce, especially if what you loved was a lady knight with magical powers and who fights alongside best friends and has sometimes romantic relationships with her best friends and the kind of complications that that creates. Next for me is The Isle in the Silver Sea by Tasha Suri. This is another romantasy. You can see that maybe all of the romantasies are kind of clustered towards the bottom of these lists, but this one is about a world where there are stories that are essentially reincarnated again and again over lifetimes, and these stories literally like hold this world together. They are not just stories, they are a part of the fabric of this world. And so we're following two main characters who are a knight and a witch who are from this like tragic story, and the two of them are fighting against this fate, but eventually their stories do intertwine, and they are trying to break free from this kind of fate that they are destined for, and they are pushing back against that destiny. One of the things that I thought was interesting about it is that I do like the themes of this. This is doing some interesting things about like the power of storytelling, the power that we give to stories, how much power we allow them to have in dictating our lives and how they shape our world. It has themes around breaking cycles and reincarnation. Yeah, and there are just a lot of things like thematically that I liked about this. I do like that there is an actual lady knight in this who I do feel like has an internal conflict. On a thematic level, I enjoyed what it was doing. Some things that didn't quite work for me. One is that although I liked the themes that it was exploring, I didn't necessarily feel like it went far enough with them. I felt like I wanted a little more depth out of those stories. I also felt like there wasn't enough depth in the relationship, especially the main romance in this, and part of that is just because of some of the tropes that it's using. Again, very subjectively, these are not necessarily tropes that I personally love. Because the romance is so based on like reincarnation and destiny, it feels like you kind of just have to like buy in really quickly and be like, yes, I believe that they are in love with each other. We get a little bit of build up to their relationship because even though they are reincarnations, they are like this iteration of them, they are meeting each other for the first time and falling in love and all of that. I personally could have used more, and that kind of just like destiny reincarnation kind of love story isn't my personal favorite. I feel like I need a little bit more on-page development to feel invested. However, I would say that if you are somebody who enjoys like a fated mates trope, then maybe you would love this because that's essentially what this is. It is that kind of like destined love. Also, I will say that this kind of reminded me of another series that I have read, in that like if you liked the part of this that was about this kind of meta awareness of storytelling, right? Looking at story as something that is very literal, something that we can sort of look at the structure of story from the outside and the pressures that it puts on people and the way that it kind of locks them into a specific life or destiny, then you might like the 500 Kingdoms series by Mercedes Lackey. This is a series that I read a very long time ago, but kind of similar. The magic in it is kind of similar to Isle in the Silver Sea, in that it takes place in this world where there is magic called the tradition. And the tradition is this kind of omnipresent magic that if anybody's life in this world starts to at all resemble a fairy tale, sort of like the universe starts to conspire to force their life into following the trajectory of that fairy tale. And then in this world, the role of fairy godmothers is to rescue people from being manipulated by the tradition into these sometimes tragic fairy tale lives. It doesn't necessarily have the same themes as this, but if you liked that kind of meta awareness of story and having it kind of manipulate people's destinies, then you might like the 500 Kingdom series. Next, I have Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang. Neon Yang is an author that I have read before and have loved their novellas, so I was very excited for this one. This is a East Asian inspired fantasy world where our main character as a young child kills a dragon and so is sent to like the city to become a knight because that she has this ability to kill dragons. And she becomes this knight. She is very isolated from the other knights around her. She never removes her helmet or her armor in order to create kind of a physical barrier for herself. And one day she is given an assignment to essentially go investigate another kingdom because it is rumored that there are dragons there. But when she gets there, things are not as they seem. It's a little novella, so I'm not going to explain too much about what goes on in this. But I mean, once again, Neon Yang is an author that I have read before. I have really liked some of their past work, especially their novellas, so I was pretty excited about this one. And this is not my favorite thing from them, but Neon Yang, like, again, can write. Like, Neon Yang is a good writer. So in that way, I really enjoyed this. I liked a lot of the ideas or like themes of like letting down your walls and being yourself. There are some things that I didn't love about, like maybe some nitpicky things about kind of how elements of the relationship progressed, but also it is a novella, so sometimes things have to, like, you know, move a little quicker. Overall, I think I enjoyed this. I didn't necessarily feel super invested in the relationship between the characters, but it can be hard to get me invested like in a relationship in a little novella. That is something that Neon Yang has been able to do in some past books, like the Tensor series is my favorite thing from them, but it's something that I will kind of give a pass sometimes on novellas because I'm like, that's hard to do. Like I am slow to warm up to a relationship, and so I know it is hard to sell me on a relationship in so few pages. Overall, I thought this was good. I thought it was interesting. It had some themes around, especially there's disability representation in this, themes around identity and colonization. I think that there is kind of a twist in it that I found a little bit predictable, but overall, this is a very solid novella if you want like a East Asian inspired lady knight. And I would say if what you like about this, if you have read this and you want another like novella that is about a sapphic lady knight hunting dragons, then you might like The Fireborn Blade by Charlotte Bond. This one, personally, I did feel like it dragged in some places, but other people have really enjoyed it. But it is definitely a lady knight dragon hunter with a sapphic romance at the center, and it's that's the first book in what I believe is a duology. But also I would say if what you liked about Brighter Than Scale is that it is a lady knight in a setting that is not a like traditional like Western European kind of medieval vibe knight, then you might like Squire by Sarah Alfagi. It is a graphic novel, but I believe it's in a more like Middle Eastern inspired setting, and I really enjoyed that story. Next up in my list is The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. This book is the one horror on this list. Horror is not really my genre. However, this one was very interesting. It's kind of weird horror with like religious vibes to it. So it is taking place in this like medieval castle that has been under siege. They are running out of food. Our main character has somehow, like alchemically, accidentally, already worked a miracle, and so they are pressuring her to work another miracle and provide food for them. However, in the process, somehow these mysterious saints appear and they kind of drive people to cannibalistic madness. And we are following one of the few characters who is not succumbing to this delusion, and can see like what the people are actually doing and actually eating. We're following multiple perspectives, one of which is a lady knight. This one also has some like sapphic romance to it. I don't know if I mentioned, I may have forgotten to say that quite a few of these are sapphic. So The Isle in the Silver Sea and Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame, both sapphic romances as well. So this one also has a bit of like sapphic vibes to it, but less romance, more weird horror. And this one, I don't know, I feel like I kind of went back and forth about like, where does this even go on the list? Because it's kind of not like anything else that I have read or anything else that is on this list. And as much as it is weird horror, I do feel like personally could have even been weirder. The way people talk about it, I was expecting something much weirder than what I got, but I would still categorize it as like weird. I just was ready for like really weird. But overall, like, I think I enjoyed it. It was very strange, but I also think that like what it was trying to do, it certainly accomplished in terms of like being weird horror with these like religious themes, sapphic romances. There's some cannibalism in there. Like it gets real strange. And I don't know what else to say about it, but there you go. And I have no recommendations for if you liked this, what else to read, because I don't really read horror and I have not read anything else like this. All right, so that concludes the kind of murky middle of the four that I feel like could kind of go in any order, honestly. But now we are on to my top two, my two favorites. So number 2 is Ladies' Night by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. And this also a very different vibe from like everything else on this list, because so another sapphic lady knight fantasy romance. I guess technically romantasy in that it is fantasy romance, but not romantasy in terms of like stylistically. I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as romantasy because romantasy has a very specific like style to me. So in this we have two main characters. One is a noblewoman who is essentially being sold off as a prize for a tournament, and the other is the daughter of a blacksmith who wants to become a knight. And the two of them meet, and our blacksmith's daughter decides to disguise herself as a man to enter the tournament to win the hand of this lady and to protect her from being forced to marry one of these men that she doesn't know and doesn't want. Of course, along the way, they fall in love as they have this like hidden identity, you know, deception going on. But overall, I felt like this was just very fun. It's very lighthearted. It's a fun romp. It is intentionally like anachronistic. It feels very much to me like something like A Knight's Tale, the movie. And that's kind of my comp or recommendation, that if you like this book, I don't have a book recommendation, but you may want to go watch or rewatch A Knight's Tale, because it has that kind of similar vibe to it. And although it is more like lighthearted and maybe a little goofy compared to some of the other ones on this list, our main character is not technically a knight. She may not fulfill all of my check boxes of what makes a knight character. I still just like had a fun time, got fun knight vibes from it. And in this case, because it was kind of intentionally lighthearted and fun and anachronistic and all of these things, I was maybe a little less judgmental about whether it's like really making like an emotionally complex knight character, right? That's not what it's doing. It is just doing like the fun vibes of like, you know, hidden identity, jousting, save the maiden, like all of that kind of stuff. And that's what I got from it, and I had a good time, and I gave this one 4 stars, so this is my second favorite. And finally, my number 1 favorite that we have been counting down or counting up to, which I feel like at this point will not be a surprise, is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. I forgot that I have the book next to me. The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. This was one of my favorite books of the year last year. I just absolutely love this. And in this, we start out with following Owen Mallory, who is a scholar who is obsessed with the story of Una Everlasting. So this is set in a fantasy world that still feels very familiar. It's technically a different world, but it almost feels like an alternate history kind of setting. But Owen Mallory is obsessed with the story of Una Everlasting, who is a lady knight that is almost kind of a myth in the way that like King Arthur is this mythic knight. And her story and the tragedy of her death has really shaped like the national identity of this country. And some things happen that end up sending Owen back in time to document and maybe manipulate the life and story of Una Everlasting. And when he meets her, she is maybe a more complex and maybe less black and white heroic character than he initially thought. He actually is sent back again and again to continue to find Una and kind of change bits of story, bits of history in order to please the people who are sending him back in time in this way. But of course, across these lifetimes, as they're finding each other again and again, they develop a relationship. Now, this book, I have seen people categorize this as romantasy, which I disagree. There is a romance in this, and it is important to the story. I would not categorize this as romantasy or a fantasy romance. I think that this is fantasy with a romance in it. And the author has also specifically said that this is not romantasy. So I will fight people about this. But beyond the categorization of this book, I absolutely loved this. There are so many things. I think it just does so many things well. First, we'll talk about that Alex E. Harrow's writing is absolutely beautiful. She writes with such clarity, especially her characterization. She can do that kind of writing where like she tells you like one sentence about a character or one like thing that one action that they do, and I'm like, I know exactly who that character is. I know who this person is. Just the clarity with which she can write. I think that thematically it is so rich and strong. I think that the themes are not necessarily subtle. I think that it is very much like a parable, but I think that the themes are fantastic. It has a lot of themes about nationalism, propaganda, and national identity, the manipulation of history and story in order to shape national identity and justify things like wars and inequality. It has themes about, you know, what is the nature of heroism versus cowardice and who are the real heroes in a situation. Themes about responsibility and what it means to give up responsibility or take responsibility for your own life. And then of course themes about love and how that shapes the kind of choices that we make. I just think that this is such a strong book that is so fantastic. It's not even that long, and I feel like it accomplishes so much. And it is so like pointed in what it is doing, and I think it accomplishes it so well. I just enjoyed this so much, even though it has things in it that I wouldn't normally like. Like, I don't enjoy time travel, and I still liked this. So yeah, I felt like this was so fantastic. There were maybe a few times where it dragged a little for me, or I just didn't feel like fully emotionally engaged, but overall, this was fantastic. I think I gave this one 4.5 stars, one of my favorite books of the year last year, and definitely my #1 book of the 2025 Lady Night releases that I read last year. And I would say, if you liked this, I have 2 recommendations. One is Lady Hotspur by Tessa Gratton. It is the second book in the Innis Lear duology. So the first one is The Queens of Innis Lear, and the second one is Lady Hotspur. Lady Hotspur is the one that has sapphic lady knights. Tessa Gratton's writing is also just incredibly beautiful, maybe a little more poetic and verbose than the tight clarity of Alex E. Harrow's, but I think that if you love you know, complex lady knights and beautiful writing and atmospheric writing, you'll like Lady Hotspur. And then my other recommendation is The Wolf and His King by Finn Longman. I just read it this year. It is going to be one of my favorite books of this year. And this is another one that has absolutely beautiful writing. It does some really interesting things with perspective and structure. And I think, again, if you appreciate the writing in this, like, the writing is quite different, but if you appreciate beautiful and like evocative, emotional writing with like about a knight with a romance at the center, The Wolf and His King is a queer retelling of I think it's 12th century story about a medieval werewolf knight. Then I think if you like this, you would like The Wolf and His King. All right, so those are all of my rankings. And a few recommendations for all of the 2025 Lady Night releases that I read. Please let me know if you've read any of these, how you would rank them. Do you agree or disagree with my ranking? I know that this is a highly subjective ranking, so I would love to know how you would place any of these. And what was your favorite, or if there are any other Lady Night books that you would recommend. I know there are also a few coming out this year, so I'm going to be posting on my Instagram about some of the ones that I'm kind of keeping an eye on that are 2026 releases. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!